The Razorbacks said to Bevo, "Allow us to be the first to welcome you to the SEC." Yesterday, the Texas Longhorns traveling to Arkansas to take on the Razorbacks, hoping to extend their season to 2-0. However, Arkansas had other plans, ultimately taking down the Longhorns in a game that was really intriguing and one we really need to talk about. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Were you surprised at how Arkansas handled the Longhorns yesterday? And let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed that content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions, though small, are massive to content creators such as myself. But with all that being said, let's talk about this because this was really surprising in how it came to be. If you'll go back and remember when I was on the Horns Down podcast, I posted that video on the channel with my talk with them. We had a really interesting conversation surrounding Texas. And he was saying how he'd talked to different Texas fans before, and he was asking them what your expectations for the season are. He believed that playoffs, right? A Texas fan he'd talked to had said a Big Ten championship. Meanwhile, I was sitting there saying, I think you're both a little high on the Longhorns in year one. I don't see either of those things happening because I think that when you have a new coaching staff, a new quarterback in a conference where OU has such a stranglehold on it, Iowa State, who doesn't look good so far this year, at least they return a coaching staff, a quarterback, and a ton of talent. I thought it'd be very hard for Texas even to hit the Big 12 championship. Now, ultimately, when you have Bijan, I think that you could squeak a game or two out that maybe people didn't think you would, and especially with Iowa State not looking very good. But you're not going to be doing that if you show up the way you did yesterday, because the Texas Longhorns absolutely got outworked. And it was very intriguing to see, because at the end of the game, when we're talking about one of the best running backs in the country, in Bijan Robinson, he had 19 carries for 69 yards for 3.6 yards per carry. But the interesting thing is his long was of 20. And if I was to take away his long of 20, he now has 18 carries for 49 yards and an average yards per carry of 2.7. That shows how non-existent the offensive line was for Texas. Because at the end of the game, Texas gave up 10 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. And what's more is the Texas Longhorns as a team tried 41 rushes, and they only got 138 yards out of that. 41 rushes, 138 yards for an average of 3.4 yards per carry. That's not going to be a winning recipe in the Big 12, but certainly not when you move to the SEC. That's a recipe that's going to put you in a really bad position within the SEC. If your offensive line and if your line of scrimmage can't contain anything, good luck. It's going to be very, very tough sledding, and it's the exact same thing I talked about with LSU when they went out and played UCLA. You got flat out whooped at the line of scrimmage. It's tough to recover from that. Now, the Texas Longhorns, intriguingly enough, are a team that going into this year, 24/7 Sports had pegged at number 7 in the blue chip ratio. So they do have talent, albeit it's not the type of talent that may have the cohesion that will allow them to do this, because that offensive line really needs help. They desperately need help at the offensive line. Because if you're attempting 41 rushes in a game and you're only getting 138 yards, 3.4 yards per carry, you at least need your passing game to be mitigating the loss of your running game. However, that was non-existent for the Longhorns as well. Hudson Card went 8 of 15 for 61 yards and 4.1 yards per attempt. That's a terrible stat line, especially when Steve Sarkisian is an offensive guy. And that really brings up one of the most surprising things is when you're looking at this game right here, this is the biggest win Arkansas has had in quite some time. And when I look at these offensive stats, it's what led me to that tweet yesterday, that Arkansas is beating Texas in every single phase of this game, defensively, offensively, special teams, and coaching. And look, I'm not trying to sit here and play couch coach. That's not my intention. But one of the most confusing points in that game to me was in the third quarter when Texas is down big and they need to rally back. and you need to get the first down. You've struggled gaining yards consistently all night long. You've struggled putting consistent drives together all night long, and your defense is having to stay on the field the entirety of the night. And the problem with your defense being on the field all night is they're going to get tired. And Arkansas just kept running the ball down their throat. Arkansas only ran the ball 6 more times than the Longhorns. The Longhorns ran at 41. Arkansas ran at 47. Arkansas had 333 yards, 7.1 yards per carry. If you're giving up almost a first down every time the other team gets the ball, you're in a bad place. You are going to have a really hard time winning those games, and it's something that must be corrected and must be corrected soon, because that right there makes it next to impossible for your defense to ever recover. Especially, and this is what circles me back to where I said I don't want to be a couch coach. Your defense is struggling that mightily. Arkansas is running all over you. You know that your defense has been on the field the majority of the game. Your offense needs to alleviate some of the pressure on your defense. And in a key drive in the third quarter, what's dialed up? Deep shot that missed. Deep shot that missed. Now you're sitting there at third and distance, and you need to get the first down. And the Texas offensive line couldn't give Hudson Card the protection needed, so he has to scramble from the pocket. Ultimately, the Longhorns don't get it. When your offensive line can't buy you time anyways, that's the part I don't get. If Texas's offensive line was great, that sequence would make a little bit more sense to me. The Texas Longhorns were soft yesterday, and there's really no other way to put it. They got beaten every facet of that game, and now the really interesting thing for me is, how do you respond? Because it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And this ultimately is why I began this segment talking about my conversation with the Horns Down podcast, saying that I disagreed with their synopsis and even a Texas fan's synopsis of where Texas would be at the end of the year. I thought both of their expectations were far too lofty. I didn't see Texas making the Big 12 championship. I thought that there was a path for them to make it, but I wouldn't be just down in the dumps if they didn't, because I thought this team had some work to do, and last night showed this team has some work to do. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Longhorns rebound. They're going to need a big rebound after this, especially when you're looking to move to the SEC sooner rather than later. You're going to have some things to work on. Very interested in hearing from y'all. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.